if we're in a place where we feel powerless or helpless, like we have the inability to have control over our own dominion, that's a lie. Ultimately, in the first place, like, you do have a lot of control and power in your own circumstances. Obviously not over everything. There's a lot of things that are out of your control, but focusing on those things is what allows you to dwell in this passive depression and an anxious, furrowed mind. You have to understand what you do have power over. Start with the small things. When you get up in the morning, when you go to bed at night, normal routines, how you treat yourself, how you treat the people in your immediate life, you have complete power and will over those things.
Starting with the small steps, seeing those small gains that you can make, small ways that you can take control of your life, and that will blossom into something that is much more powerful than that. Welcome to the Masculine Spirit Podcast, where we discuss masculine development, spirituality, and potential from a Christian perspective. I'm Robert Krause, and I'm joined by my co-host, Noah Bills. Today's discussion will explore the concept of radical responsibility and the role it plays in helping us overcome depression. How are you doing, Noah?
Fantastic. I'm ready to explore the ideas of responsibility and how it can help us tackle life issues such as depression.
Yes, sir. Me too. I think responsibility is key in addressing things like depression and anxiety.
I would even argue that anxiety and depression are things that greatly limit your ability to follow through with your responsibilities. Like, they're kind of like the antithesis. Depression and anxiety just rule your mind, make you have contradictory feelings and thoughts, and just ultimately demotivate you from doing the things that need to be done in your life.
Sure, yeah. When you're in that headspace, a depressed headspace, an anxious headspace, it feels like you don't have power. It feels like you're under the thumb of this sadness or inability to control your thoughts. And, obviously responsibility isn't the only thing. It's not the primary thing that's going to help you get out of those mindsets, but it's a way for you to kind of gain control, gain the upper hand, and start to make progress against those things.
Helps you live with it better, for sure.
Yeah. So we have 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. It says, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." And I think for me, this just communicates to me that when you're operating from a place of fear, which is what tends to happen in depression and anxiety, this is not what God has willed for you. This is not the spirit, the mindset that God wants you to be in. It says that He's given us a spirit of power and love and self-control, which obviously doesn't feel like that all the time, but that's what God says He's given us.
We are ordained with much more power than we realize most times. It's just learning how to bring it out from yourself and how to facilitate it and use it in ethical and great ways.
And what do you think are some of the ways that when we don't feel like we can identify with those things, what are some of the ways that we can access them even in those moments?
It's an interesting question. You're going to have to give me time to think about that. So you're saying the idea is if we're in a place where we feel powerless or helpless, or like we have the inability to have control over our own dominion, then I think the main thing is that's a lie. I think ultimately, in the first place, like, you do have a lot of control and power in your own circumstances. Obviously not over everything. There's a lot of things that are out of your control, but focusing on those things is what allows you to dwell in this passive depression and an anxious, furrowed mind. You have to really understand what you do have power over. I would say start with the small things. When you get up in the morning, when you go to bed at night, normal routines, how you treat yourself, how you treat the people in your immediate life, you have complete power and will over those things. And once you start making more conscious decisions, once you start having goals and saying, I want to get this out of this person or this out of this situation, then you start making a plan. And once you start following through with a plan and you see the abundance coming out of it, that's what I think really starts rolling you out of, the depressive, crippled state. Is you find an objective, set plans and goals for it, you follow through, you reap the rewards, and you get that nice little dopamine hit in your brain, and you're like, sick, I can do things. I love that. It's so cool. So start small, I'd say.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to kind of say. Sounds like starting with the small steps, seeing those small gains that you can make, small ways that you can take control of your life, and that will blossom into something that is much more powerful than that. It could be as simple as just doing your laundry instead of letting it sit there for weeks on end.
Gotta do your laundry. What is it? They say there's an endless cycle of doing laundry. You always have to do your dirty laundry, but that also produces an endless cycle of clean, fresh laundry and clothes to wear.
It's a glass half full, glass half empty kind of situation, I guess.
I agree. The cycle of pain also brings the cycle of abundance, if you consider doing laundry that painful, I guess.
But yeah, laundry, I guess, can be a bit of a metaphor for how we approach life. I never really thought about that.
It's all about clean house. I mean, that in itself is also a metaphor, but it's the idea of taking the things in your life that need regulation and upkeep and constant care. I mean, it really just is like the small things. Like if you're not capable of doing consistent work, then you're not going to see consistent fruition. And I think that's more important than anything, is the consistency. You see that in a lot of things. Anybody who wants to develop any sort of skill, who wants to produce better relationships, who wants to just make more out of anything, you have to be consistent with something. Otherwise, you're just gambling. Otherwise, you're just doing one thing for the one time. Maybe you put a lot of effort into it. It doesn't pay off. Well, yeah. There wasn't any consistency there. There's no consistent work. How are you supposed to get a consistent outcome?
Sure, and I've been there a lot in my life, especially with fitness. In high school, there were many times that I would try to get into fitness. I would tell myself, I'm going to run every day. I'm going to do this many push-ups, this many sit-ups, and I would do it for maybe a week if I was lucky. And
I mean, running's really boring, so it's hard to keep up.
It's true. Feels great afterwards, but the process is boring.
Debatable, but okay, continue.
No, but consistency is a huge thing. I don't know if you listen to Jordan Peterson at all. Do you happen to know who Jordan Peterson is?
Yeah, I'm aware of some of the things that man says. Not
Sure.
a lot, but some, yeah.
He has this concept of cleaning your room, and he kind of uses it as a starting point for addressing the problems in your life. Kind of the similar thing as to what I was saying about the laundry is you can start with something as simple as just cleaning your room, and that can spur on into other things in life that can help you to gain a sense of control, gain a sense of responsibility and caring for the things that you own, which then translates to your relationships, translates to your career, to your fitness, finances, whatever it may be. So I like that concept.
There's also just satisfaction in, a job well done and just having something clean that you can call your own. It's organized and it makes sense and you can show it, so to speak. You don't have to feel shameful about it. Clean house mentality. It's the way to go.
Yeah, it's kind of like a reflection of your mind. If you have a messy room, you can't find anything, you don't know where stuff is, then in some ways it can be a reflection of what's going on in your head. Yeah, start small and just watch how far that will get you.
For sure. And I mean, starting small can be with anything too. It doesn't necessarily have to be cleaning things. Some people really hate cleaning. It takes like a bit to get into that mentality, because that's where you're tackling all these gross, unorganized things the unfettered mind produces. You just got to find something.
Start with something. So there's a few different areas of life that I wanted to discuss, as far as different areas where we can take responsibility. And the list goes from the most internal type of domains in our life into the more external domains in our life. So real quick, I'll just go over each area. First, we have the body. So that's going to be nutrition, sleep, exercise, general health. The mind, which would be education, continuous learning, all of those good things. The soul, which is your moral sense, in some sense, your relationships. If you are religious, then that would fit into there as well. Time is a huge thing, probably our most valuable resource that we have. So taking responsibility over time is a huge thing. Words, the way that you speak, you want to be truthful, intentional, build other people up with your words. Then we also have money, which is important. You want to be responsible with your money. We talked about this a little bit in the gratitude versus greed episode. But yeah, money is, despite how much people talk crap about it, it's an important domain in life. Then we have family. Family is important for pretty obvious reasons. They're your central relationships that you foster in life and support each other. So that's a very important area. And lastly is community, which is just your broader relationships. Could be being generous to the homeless in your community, could be volunteering. Those are just a few examples, but giving back to your community in some way. So we can go over each one of those in a little more detail now.
Let's start from the top. Let's start with the body, responsibility over the body. What are some ways that you're responsible with your body, Robbie? And what are some ways you would say maybe you're not responsible with your body?
Yeah, I definitely have both of those aspects. I think everybody is irresponsible in some ways and responsible in others. I would say recently my consistency in the gym has not been what I want it to be. I've been busy with a lot of things. I've been busy with this podcast, with work, with my relationships.
Excuses.
It is excuses, but
I'm kidding. I'm joshing.
No, I mean, it's true in a sense because I want to improve in that aspect. It's not like I'm out of shape or something, but I'm somebody who does take pride in being at a certain physical fitness level, and I'm not necessarily at that level that I want to be at right now.
For sure. I mean, we all make sacrifices somewhere. Like you're never going to be, like in all the categories that we listed, there's no expectation to be at like peak of anything. It's more of just like identify major issues with what you have, maybe identify some of your strengths and just find things to work on or maintain, I would say.
Sure. And like you said before, consistency is a huge thing. So even if I'm not sticking perfectly to my exercise plan, if I am continually still going to the gym on a regular basis, maybe not as much as I would like to, but still working towards that goal. But yeah, it's taken a bit of a backseat to some other things in my life. With that, I am trying to be a lot more controlled about my nutrition. So specifically limiting sugar. I've been trying to basically limit myself to one sugary item per day, whether it's candy, cookies, some kind of dessert, cake, whatever it is, because I can tend to overeat that stuff. Sugar's not good for you. It's not good for your energy levels. If you're eating a bunch of simple carbohydrates, it can cause you to have energy dips. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, it's the end of the holiday season. Sugar was bountiful for me. So that is also something that got to keep a bit of an eye on. But I mean, all things good in moderation, like you said, it's the limitation of just like one thing a day, not an overindulgence.
Yeah, and you don't have to feel like you need to completely cut these things out. It's probably not necessary to be like, oh, I'm not eating any more sugary snacks, no more candy, no more pastries, nothing like that. But if you just give yourself a limit, some kind of limit that you can deal with and stick to, then that'll probably be effective for achieving what you want to achieve.
It's definitely big. I mean, when it comes to the body, I feel like there's a few kind of main things. We already kind of touched up about it, but fitness to some degree, keeping your body moving, stretched out, limber, and all these things. You hear so many older people talk about how they wish they had been more physically active because now it's a lot more difficult to get into shape. Like if you can get yourself into a good shape while you're younger, then have some degree of maintenance, your body's gonna age a lot slower and you're gonna have so much more mobility and be able to do a lot more with yourself when you're in your 70s or 80s. I have a professor of mine, I'm not entirely sure how old he was, but definitely within like the 70s ballpark. But that dude like swims like 4 miles a day and he hikes all the time and all these rigorous trails. Like he keeps himself in really good shape. Versus on the other hand, there's some 70-year-old people that are just dropping dead They just can't do anything. They just have no mobility, no energy, no nothing. It's because they didn't really prioritize their body enough, which is kind of obvious, but I don't know. It's an oversaid thing, but it has so much value and importance because a healthy body really feeds into a lot of other things. A healthy body is a healthy mind. If you want your mentality to stay healthy, what you're feeding and doing to your body ultimately nourishes your brain. That's your whole mental. If you're doing all these things to your body, you're putting all these substances in, you're just dopamine fixing all the time. Your mentality's not going to be doing nearly as well as it could be.
Consistent physical exercise is actually the most important habit that someone can have for the prevention of dementia and Alzheimer's in the future. I don't know if you knew that, but
I don't know, dementia sounds kind of fun though. So
I don't
you
know.
have to do all these crazy, wild things and nobody can blame you because you have dementia.
You say that now, but I think if you had dementia, you might feel a little bit differently.
Would I even know if I have dementia, if I did? Do dementia patients know that they have dementia?
Some of them do. Some of them do. Some of them have moments of lucidity where they break out of their hellish nightmare that they've been living in and come back to reality.
Lovely.
Yeah. So sometimes, they can know that they are not all there.
Fair enough.
But that's a topic for another time. The point is, exercise is incredibly important, not only for your body, but for the health of your mind as well.
For sure. Same thing with sleep. That's a really big thing. There's like a lot of talk about how there's not like crazy concrete proof of what sleep is supposed to provide for us. But one of the main things is how do I say it? Like settling in your memories. And just like, if you want to be more knowledgeable about things, you put in all this work to study for it. But if you're not resting your mind and solidifying it in that little coma-like state, it doesn't really stick nearly as well. I remember a lot at university when I was a scholar. There was always this idea that people would stay up really late at night to study or get up really early in the morning, not really get a lot of sleep to just kind of cram everything. But the people that I saw consistently doing well with their exams were the people that knew to just rest well, study like way beforehand, but then make sure you're getting enough sleep the night before. Because if you try to cram everything, your brain's just kind of scattered. You're not giving yourself the rest to really let it settle. And you go into the exam with the same mindset. The ideas are floating around, but you're not really making connections, and there's nothing really set into your foundation, so to speak. Again, a lot of these ideas of bodily responsibility do feed into the mind. I would argue that they are two sides of the same coin. I've said it a lot, that physical health is mental health and vice versa. So sleep, exercise, and then nutrition, obviously, same thing.
Yeah, as far as the connection between the body and the mind, when you're pursuing excellence as far as your mind goes, you're trying to learn new things, you're trying to gain new skills, gain a new perspective on the world maybe. And when you are working towards excellence in your body, you're pursuing this improvement in your energy, in the way that you look, all these different things. But, they're very similar pursuits, because whether you are pursuing excellence of the mind or the body, it's going to be a process where you're continually learning, you're continually building on the things that you have learned in the past and working towards this ideal that is somewhere off in space. It's the ideals are in our head and we're working to achieve them. But I think it's a very, very similar process in many ways. An important part of this is being able to have conversations with people that you disagree with, even on the most controversial issues. You want to be able to sit down with somebody regardless of what they believe and have an honest conversation, because it will cause you to grow, and maybe the other person will learn something too. You can both come away as more well-rounded individuals. It's a very enjoyable time when you find somebody who can respectfully disagree with you and you can respectfully disagree with them. It allows you to have this kind of interaction that you don't normally have in everyday life, because obviously humans have a tendency to surround themselves with people who think very similarly to them, which is it's fine. It's advantageous. You get along with certain people, you spend time with them. You and me, for instance, we see a lot of things very similarly. But when you're around people who think very similarly to you most of the time, you can start to have very similar interactions. Maybe interactions can begin to feel a little bit mundane sometime and you want something more interesting, something that challenges your worldview a little bit, it's very nice to be able to talk to somebody who maybe views things completely opposite to how you do. Yeah. And these kind of interactions where there is potential for conflict, I think the line that you really don't want to cross is attacking someone's character. Because when you start attacking someone's character rather than their argument, that's when they're going to become defensive. They're going to start attacking your character. And at that point, you're both just kind of name calling, just throwing crap at each other. You're not really focused on the center of the argument at that point. And this process of developing the mind, especially through conversation, it really does link back to depression and anxiety. You know, we can bundle those together because being able to have a intentional and well-articulated conversation with somebody can boost your confidence and boost your self-esteem in such a massive way. I know that for a large portion of my life, I really struggled with having conversations that I felt like were meaningful. And I think one of the big reasons for that is because I was trying to impress people, trying to get some kind of positive reinforcement from people with the interactions that I was having. But really, what people really want from you in a conversation is for you to be honest and open, willing to receive the ideas that they're talking about and willing to share your honest thoughts on things. It took me a long time to learn that, but it's an important lesson. I think that, you know, the development of our moral standards and ideals that we choose to live by is a result of the mind. It's a result of the way that we perceive the world, which is initially it's a intellectual process that we go through, which is then translated into a more moral manifestation. It's a process that you're going through throughout your entire life because ideals change, your moral standards can change. I believe there is an objective moral standard, but the way that we interpret these things, the way that we apply the moral standards that we perceive does change throughout life. We have to take responsibility for looking at our ideals and analyzing them, being skeptical of them in some ways through our experience to either reaffirm or discard those ideals. And I think one of the central ideals that hopefully most people can agree upon is the idea of looking inwardly, finding the flaws within yourself, finding the areas that need improvement and working on those things, because everybody has flaws and everybody needs to be honest. Everybody needs to be honest about what those flaws are if they expect to have any kind of spiritual development. Like, you're not going to become a spiritually attuned person, if you will, if you're not willing to look at those things. Yeah, for me, for example, some of my most prevalent flaws were wanting to impress people. And, you know, that's still a flaw that I have. I've gained a lot more control over it than what it used to be. But yeah, you know, I had this tendency to want to impress people with the way that I spoke to them, the way that I appeared with money, if that's, you know, if that was important at that stage in my life. And one of the reasons why I feel like I've been able to develop so much since then is because I was able to identify that flaw in myself and look at ways to improve. You know, I decided to start being much more honest. I took intentional steps to be more honest in the way that I spoke, not to be concerned with what people are thinking of me all the time. I decided to pursue goals because I wanted to pursue them rather than trying to appear a certain way to a certain friend group or anything like that. And yeah, as I made those changes, I was able to gain the self-esteem to be confident in myself and not have to try to identify myself in what other people thought of me.
Fitting in is oftentimes an interesting challenge. Some people have it easier than others, I would say. I think it's mostly kind of a mental game, but the more you try doing something like that, I think the more you get away from yourself and who you really are and who you should be developing. And also just you start making sacrifices in all these other aspects. I mean, we listed off like a ton of things earlier, you know, body, mind, soul, time, words, money, family, community, all those fun things. But the more you start acting for other people and their selfish desires, your own selfish desires, the more you're detracting from the beneficial aspects of your life that you could be working on and developing. Obviously, to an extent, we want to make sacrifices for other people. That's how we have and build relationships. But if you're trying too hard to be something that you're not, for people who want you to be something that you're not, then I think it's a good time to step away and reevaluate what exactly is important and what the end goal is, and maybe redirect that energy into something more beneficial.
Sure. I think it also comes down to the type of relationship it is. Like if we're talking about my relationship with my wife, obviously there are lots of sacrifices that I have to make for her. And that's actually a good thing. That's a good thing that causes me to develop into a better man, because I need to be the best version of myself for her.
For sure.
But if we're talking about a friend from school who is maybe like, oh, really impressed by me when I wear expensive things, as an example, do I really need to like try to wear cool clothes in front of them to try to impress this person? Their relationship to me is not nearly as important as these more personal relationships that go much deeper.
100%. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like having a spouse means eternal companionship.
No way.
Versus somebody that you meet on the streets is just like an instance. And I mean, I understand wanting to do things to get people to like you and to spend time with you. As somebody who values establishing new relationships all the time, I do seek to do things to have people like me, but I have found ways to do so without sacrificing my character. And really, just like anything else, ultimately the people that you want to attract should be people that can willingly know you and accept you for who you are, flaws and all, and build like a good, healthy relationship with. Like the example they gave earlier, if your only way to establish a connection with somebody is to spend all your money on clothes and then wear those clothes and have people think, wow, that dude has nice clothes. And it's like, what's the end goal there? Like, you're just going to be the guy with nice clothes who's in debt because you have cool threads. I mean, I like cool threads, but again, it's just something that you really need to evaluate for yourself. Like, it is very telling of your morals and values, how you present yourself, how you attract these people, what kind of people you attract, and the people that you keep in your life. Ultimately, the people you keep around should reflect the values that you have or you're striving for. If you're around people who you think have lot lower moral standings or are just people that do things that you think are dumb or evil in some senses, maybe you shouldn't spend as much time with them in some capacity. Sure, I don't think it's like a bad thing to have friendships with people who aren't like the best people, but you can't let their ideas and actions affect yours and your character.
Yeah, it's a cliche, but you're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. Everybody's heard that a billion times.
For sure. 100%.
No, you can have friends and acquaintances with all kinds of people of different
Criminals even.
Yeah, different moral characters. I'll say that, and that's okay. But like, who are you spending the most time with? Who are you cultivating relationships with? Me personally, I have friends who I think have very good morals and very, they're conscientious people, but they don't see the world the way I do it at all.
For sure.
Whether they're atheist, they're, a completely different religion, or they have, I don't know, some kind of weird, crazy beliefs you've never heard of. Like, I
Heard some
am
crazy
friends.
ones for sure.
Yeah, flying spaghetti monster.
Well, I mean, I believe in a flying spaghetti monster.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be insensitive.
Yeah, I don't know what you're trying to insinuate there, but we'll leave that for another time. Go on, go ahead. I want to hear what else you have to say about the flying spaghetti monster and people who believe it.
The point is, you can develop relationships with these people who think very differently from you. You take the good things from them, you take the positive aspects from the relationship, and that's all you need. And then you can also maybe learn something from them every once in a while.
Exactly. You're letting yourself be challenged in a good, respectful, healthy manner.
Yeah, and this soul aspect of our lives, I think it does actually have a lot to do with the way that we spend our time.
For sure. What you spend time contemplating, what you spend time in action doing, whether it's voluntary or involuntary, it does shape you. We are products of our environment.
And we have control over what we spend time on most of the time. Of course, we all have to go to work. We all have to maybe go to school. There's different things that we're responsible for. But outside of that, we get to decide if we're going to spend hours watching Netflix, playing video games, maybe reading a book that will
Gamers rise up.
rise up, stand tall. But you can choose to read a book, choose to engage in communities that have similar values to what you want to develop. So yeah, it's very, very tied to spirituality.
For sure, 100%. And I mean, time is like one of the biggest things that ends up getting sacrificed when you're somebody who constantly dwells in their anxieties or is just kind of lost in their depression. Like I remember when I was younger, I would be sleeping all the time. And I think it was kind of a combination of like anxiety and depression. I would sleep as a coping mechanism for anxiety because if I just didn't want to think about things, I would just try to get my brain to shut off. So sleeping was a coping mechanism for that. Then on top of that, I would allow myself to sleep extensively because I just didn't have motivation to do anything else. My bed, will stand to be the most comfortable situation I ever have in my entire life. It's tried and true. Getting me out of bed is horrible. It's terrible. Never try it. Never. It is a conduit for my weaker inhibitions, so to speak. But ultimately, one thing that I realized when I was younger is that I spent so much time doing nothing with myself that I was not getting, I wasn't really just going anywhere. Like I didn't really have goals. I didn't have time to facilitate things like that. I didn't have the mental space to try to make something out of myself and try to learn like what I wanted from my environment and from the opportunities that I had. It is very difficult to manage time when you're lost in those things.
I had a similar experience growing up. I prioritized things that I don't really prioritize now at this point. When I was in high school and middle school to some extent, I was very present focused, as in not long-term thinking, not thinking for the wider goals in my life, and just focused on the moment, trying to get whatever type of pleasure I could at the moment, whether that was relaxation, being lazy, going out with friends, participating in different types of substance abuse. Then there's, porn, obviously. So those things just suck away your time. There's, with some of those things, you can engage in them responsibly. And if you're able to control how much time you spend on them, it'll be fine. But when you combine all of them and it's your central focus in life to just get to those things, get to the next little dopamine hit that you're looking for, it's a very dark path. And like you were saying, it leaves no time for spirituality. It leaves no time for spiritual development. And it just feeds into your appetites that are sinful, feeds into your sinful appetites.
Yeah. It just makes your depression and anxieties worse. At least in my experience, it just fed into it. It just would make me lazier. It would make me have worse thoughts and just kind of lock me in a space where I just wanted to go brain dead so I didn't have to contemplate anything else. And that's where really like starting small was a really big stepping stone for me, and just finding like small things to keep myself occupied that weren't just bed rotting.
Sure, because at the end of the day, when you're participating in these activities, you know that they're not the best thing you could be doing. You know that there's more productive things.
Hope yeah.
we hope, but we all have this voice inside of us, this guidance from God, and we can feel when we're doing something that isn't aligned with what we're supposed to be doing. So then if we're living this lifestyle and we go out into the world, we're trying to act like, well, I'm confident. I know where I'm going. I have goals. I can accomplish things. Meanwhile, in the back of our head, we know that we're living this lifestyle of just rotting away in bed, trying to chase these pleasure-giving activities. You can't reconcile those two things. So you're caught in this situation where you're trying to act confident, but you have nothing to back it up in your own mind.
Yeah, exactly. It's very detrimental. I think it kind of just wears away at you if you're pretty much living a lie. And some people are really good at keeping up that lie. I feel like personally, I'm actually really good at lying to myself and like gaslighting myself into thinking I'm maybe doing better than I actually am. But that, I mean, it's detrimental long term. You're not being honest with yourself. You're not making developments in places that you should be. You're not working towards your goals for yourself and for others. Um, it's a waste of time, which arguably time is our most precious resource. It allows us to do and to contemplate and produce and to just live in general. Just try to be the best that we can be for our own selves and for our loved ones and people around us.
And when I started to take responsibility for my time by doing things like working out, trying to read my Bible every day, these things that seem a little bit insignificant, just looking at them by themselves, I found that in those social situations where I wanted to be confident, I was able to think back and be like, oh yeah, I worked out today. I read my Bible today. So I do have something that I can be confident about. I do have this moral center that I'm basing my life off of. And when you have that, it's a very powerful thing.
For sure.
Yes. Now, getting into the discussion of words and our speech, how do you think that the words that we speak can influence our perception of ourselves and potentially affect our experience with depression and anxiety?
I think words are ultimately just, I mean, obviously what we say is just a portrayal of our thoughts and our experiences. Words are a reflection of what we put out to people, and what we put out to people comes back and resonates with ourselves. It's, um, even though, of course, you can lie, there's a lot of truth to what you say, how you say it, the intent behind it. It is very telling of your character, and it ties a lot into confidence. Not even just words, but I would say in general, just how you portray yourself ties into this greatly. Your, your portrayal of what you have to offer, your portrayal of your confidence, the portrayal, even the things that you lack and need assistance with are all really important. And if you're not putting yourself out there truthfully, um, then you're just lying and digging yourself into a hole. You're second guessing yourself. You're creating more space for these weeds of anxieties to grow. You really have to make sure that, I think we've talked about this before, you speak with intent. You're kind of wasting yourself and your time and other people's time if you just talk for the sake of talking and be frivolous. Not to say that there isn't room for, little goofy conversations here and there, but again, it is a portrayal of who you are and your intention. And that's really important for navigating the world and navigating yourself and being honest with yourself.
And this is a huge one for me because, like I was talking about in the personal testimonies episode, social anxiety was a big, big thing for me. And I think that was tied to my words a lot of the time because I was trying to portray myself in a certain way to certain people based on what I was saying, rather than honestly expressing what I was feeling and being intentional. I was, I would speak, I would overthink before I spoke, but I was overthinking for the wrong reasons. I wasn't overthinking because I wanted to be the best version of myself and build people up in the best way that I could. I was overthinking because I wanted to gain some kind of social advantage in that situation.
For sure. You sometimes end up portraying yourself as something you're not, trying too hard to be that nonchalant dreadhead, whatever it may be, trying to be like someone who's just like cool, doesn't care, maybe just like puts down other people for a joke or something. But is that really like who you are? Is that really somebody you want to be? Is that what you want to be seen as?
And it's difficult in high school when you're still developing your identity because I think a lot of people find themselves trying on these different identities. Like, oh, I'm going to see what it feels like to try to be the funny guy. I'm going to see what it feels like to be quiet and like only speak at very specific times. Yeah, cool and mysterious. Like, there's these different identities that people tend to try on. And the reason for that is that at that point, you might not really know what your true identity is yet.
For sure.
And it's difficult. But you have to stay stay honest with yourself. Be intentional with how you speak. I guess that's the best piece of advice I can give.
For sure. And I mean, if you're still trying to like find something to identify with, it is difficult to have that sort of confidence and to put backing between your words and your actions and your postures. Um, I mean, you really just do have to try things out, but you have to develop this idea beforehand of what are my goals? What do I want to be seen as? Who do I want to be? How does that type of person speak? How do they carry themselves into a room? Do they grab attention or do they kind of linger in the back and kind of provide insight towards the end? Not somebody who's like super outspoken. There's so many different roles that we can fulfill. Um, I don't think there's any real pressure to be any one specific way. I mean, there are societal pressures and everything like that, but realistically, you are your own individual and you have to figure that out for yourself. But you ascertain the idea, figure out how those types of people portray themselves, and then you follow through.
If you're at that point in your life where you're not sure what kind of social identity you have, it's always good to fall back on the identity of being someone who builds other people up. You want to be someone who is edifying in your speech, who offers compassion, offers support, offers wisdom, which is easier said than done. But
for sure.
Yeah, you can always fall back on that.
You can't just like jump straight into helping people if you don't know exactly how to do that. It's one thing to cause mistakes when developing yourself. You should not be half-baked and go in and try to fix other people's problems if you have no business doing so.
For sure.
I hear kind of the phrasing often that if you can't help yourself, how are you supposed to help others? And that is something I greatly believe in. You see all these people who want to be there for other people all the time. And I get that it's a very good and kind-hearted thing to do. But if I see somebody who has very little ability to control themselves and to help their own situations, then it's going to be difficult for me to want to take advice or help from them. Because if I can't see any tangible progress or accomplishments on their end, I appreciate the sentiment of them wanting to help, but it's going to be much less likely for me to take their advice.
Yeah, you want to see something to back up the words that people are speaking to you.
Sure.
Which is something you want to look for in yourself as well. You don't want to be
exactly
speaking things that you can't back up in real life, that you don't have true experience with.
Exactly. I mean, that's why portrayal is super important, because if you portray yourself as somebody who has these sorts of capabilities, that people will be more trusting in you and have more confidence in you. And that allows you to have more confidence in yourself. It's a good little morale boost to have that kind of specification and people to recognize it.
Definitely. It is. That's a good feeling. The next aspect of life that we wanted to discuss was money.
Obviously responsibility with money is a huge thing. People talk about it all the time. Don't be dumb or careless with your money. End of the bit. You can move on.
Essentially, you're right. Don't spend money frivolously. Don't gamble. Take care of the things that you have, and take care of the people around you. That's number one, is use your money to take care of the people around you.
For sure. I can't consider myself somebody who has great experience with managing money in terms of like overall finances and investments. But the biggest thing is if you don't have your wealth put into something and put away for, emergencies or necessities, then you're definitely doing something wrong. You need to just be able to have something in case medical bills come up, in case your car breaks down, in case something happens with your living situation, or maybe just like a dear friend of yours just really needs help. It's good to have backup and to have reserves and to just not be frivolous with your money, and also just give generously. Why not build up the people around you with what you have? It's a very gratifying thing to do. Help strengthen your relationships. It shows a lot of your character, for sure. Don't be stingy. Don't be Mr. Krabs. Don't be crabby.
Yeah, and having the ability to manage your money in a way that is fruitful and provides stability really does help to stabilize you emotionally as well. Because in the modern world, one of the places where we find security, which could be a positive or a negative thing, depending on how you view it, one of the places where we find security is in money, because we have these expenses come up that we need to pay for. If you don't have the savings for it, then you might have to go into debt. Debt is stressful. If you're having money issues, it's stressful. It's not a fun time. And it can affect how you view yourself. It can affect how you treat people, your attitude.
It unfortunately affects how other people perceive you as well. Obviously, money is not everything. People look up to wealthy people more than they look up to those who do not have a lot. I do not argue that that is a mindset that you should adopt. There are people who have nothing who live more enriching lives than those who have everything, monetary-wise, so to speak.
Sure, and it's not about being somebody who is even a millionaire or something like that.
Billionaire.
But you don't want to have too much debt. You don't want to be worried about money all the time. If you can minimize that stress, that financial stress that a lot of people have, that's probably the best financial situation you can be in.
For sure.
Yeah.
I agree. It's good to have security for yourself and for others. So on the topic of having money for yourself and for others, that being said, family. Which I would argue is that the next two are family and community are kind of the main things we want to discuss. I would argue there's a lot of similarities, but we'll start specifically with family. This just kind of ties into interpersonal relations. We talk a lot about, the responsibilities and the benefits and why you should seek out interpersonal relationships. Because there are always going to be things that you are not able to tackle healthfully on your own. You can try to just grind through everything by yourself, but that will cause detriments to the mind, body, and soul. There's no shame in relying on other people. I know in some instances that people can be looked down upon for always needing something. I think there's extents where it's not healthy for sure if you're fully capable of taking care of yourself, but it's easier for you to rely on somebody else. That's obviously not a great thing. You want to be able to make the effort for yourself rather than have somebody spend all their time doing those things for you. But having a good, well-organized, loving family, whether it be blood or not, or just a community that feels like family, is incredibly enriching and helps you develop in so many different ways and boost your confidence, has people to help you through all these other sorts of troubles, yada, yada, yada. What have you got to say about this, Rowie? What are your thoughts on the La Familia?
Being part of a family is interesting. Obviously, it's something that everybody experiences. Everybody has a family to some extent. But the reason I say it's interesting is because they are people that you spend so much time with and that you have developed such extensive relationships with.
For sure.
That even small things that you do for them, they tend to notice those things and appreciate those things in my experience, whether it's maybe cooking a meal for your family, maybe you're cooking a meal for your parents, for your wife, whatever it happens to be, doing chores around the house. It's very good to look for these little ways that you can take responsibility for the household and to give back to your family for all the ways that they've poured into you.
Exactly. Family is also interesting in other aspects that obviously not everybody comes from healthy families. I will say there's a distinction between the birth family, people you were born into, and, you have a lot of forced developmental time with them and relationships. But there's also just the family and community people that wholeheartedly love you and are there for you. Sometimes those two are not the same. It is good to recognize that sometimes there are blood family members that are not the best for you. There are just some people in life that their relationships are just not going to be fruitful. They're going to be detrimental. They might be parasitic. It's really just about finding the people who you really align with and who you can trust and you can love unconditionally. And that's where you want to spend your time and effort fostering those kinds of relationships. every second is precious. Time is our biggest commodity. Interpersonal relationships, I think, help you more than anything else in this world, really. Having connections can get you to so many different places and get you so many skills ascertained from other people and get you connections for jobs. It can lead to even other social connections or all these other things. I place these types of things very highly in my life.
Sure. The family is arguably the most central network of relationships that people have in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, it's going to be important. It's like it should function like a sanctuary from the rest of the world. Obviously, you and I come from family backgrounds that are overwhelmingly positive, but there's a lot of people that don't. And I have a lot of compassion for people that come from those rough backgrounds. But what I would hope for those people is that they're able to find solid family type relationships with other people. You see a lot of people that struggle with relationships with relatives that may be abusive or whatever the issue is. They can tend to develop these relationships with people that aren't blood relatives, but they treat them like family, and it works out very well.
Exactly. Like I said before, I'd argue that community and family are very well tied, just kind of in that sense. Because, we think of family typically as blood related, but there's obviously a lot of familial connection that we feel with people that is not through blood, but just through, the relationships that we develop with them. Do you have any arguments, any distinctions between community and family? Like any big differences, would you say?
Yeah, the main difference I would say is family is the specific people that you are spending a lot of time with and building these deep and extensive relationships with. Community could be that, if it's in your church or whatever, but it could also just be, yeah. Community could also just be like giving back to the homeless, buying them some food, volunteering at different places, going on a mission trip to wherever to help people build houses. Like, you're not going to be necessarily building these long-lasting relationships with these people, but you're still participating in things that give back to the community.
For sure. It's a very community service oriented type stuff. Also thinking about it, I'd say that you find community like in a non-familiar connection, even like in a workplace, so to speak. You have like maybe 50 different coworkers, all with all these different roles and objectives, and you don't necessarily have to like everybody. There's this one guy in accounting that always follows your stuff wrong and is always really rude about it, but it's somebody that you constantly engage with and you have to have a relationship with and you have to work with. So sort of that sense of community as well, I think, is interesting to ascertain. Something you have to work through. You have to really establish yourself in whatever role you're in and just kind of do the best that you can, regardless of the people that, you're not the closest to them, but you still need to treat these people with patience and kindness and respect if you want to see the most out of it.
Community is something that you find no matter where you are.
For sure.
No matter what job you're in, whether you're going to school, whether you're at the gym. Yeah. All these different areas of life, there are many different types of communities, and you choose which ones you want to develop the most. It's not like you can't go all in on all these different community aspects in your life because we just don't have time for that.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
It's not physically, mentally possible.
I agree.
But you want to be participating in them to some extent.
Again, there is a role that you fulfill in a community setting. Typically, it might not be like the biggest, most impactful role, but you do serve. You are a cog in the machine.
It's just a matter of what the machine is made to do.
Exactly.
That's a discussion for another day. We can leave that for our government conspiracy theories episode.
The whole podcast episode. Yeah. Working for the capitalist machine, part 1, 2 hours long.
Yeah. Part 1. All right. Well, to end it off, we have another verse, Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. says, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable. If there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things."
Amen.
I like it because it gives you that reassurance that you actually have control over what you think about.
For sure. I'd say thoughts are like kind of the biggest thing. I mean, that's what springs everything into motion. And it's not just, there has to be continuity in these thoughts, just like there has to be continuity in anything that we strive for our goals. But yeah, it all just makes sense. Anything that's worth working for, put the most effort that you can into it.
Yeah, we can make a conscious decision to focus on these positive, commendable things, as the verse says, which is reassuring when you're coming from a place of depression or anxiety where you feel like your thoughts may be taking over your actions in some cases. But through reliance on God, casting our anxieties upon Him, we can choose to think about things that are spiritually edifying. That's an encouraging thought.
I agree.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us on today's episode. Please send us your thoughts, suggestions, and criticisms at masculinespiritpodcast@gmail.com. We both look forward to continuing this amazing journey together, and have a blessed day.
Have a blessed day.
Finding strength in submission, that's the mission. Breaking chains of tradition, new position. Walking in His vision, divine commission. This is masculine spirit, listen. Started as a boy with a heart full of questions, seeking validation through worldly possessions, learning wrong lessons about masculine expression. Depression hit heavy with painful suggestions that I wasn't worthy, wasn't making impressions, till I found His message and started progressing. Through every blessing and every testing, now I'm addressing the lies I was festering. Stand up, warrior, it's time to rise. Let His light shine through your eyes. Every battle makes you rise. This is where your spirit flies. Yeah, this is where your spirit flies. See, the thing about manhood, it isn't in muscles, though I built them daily through physical struggles, deeper than hustles and temporary puzzles. Spirit was muzzled till Christ came to shuffle my priorities, showing me purpose is foundational, rational, factual, but still inspirational, national, global, yet still congregational, building generational wisdom, that's operational. Finding strength in submission, that's the mission. Breaking chains of tradition, new position. Walking in His vision, divine commission. This is masculine spirit, listen. Biblical principles, giving me clarity. Carrying wisdom through all this disparity. Apparently strength isn't measured in scarcity, rather in charity, prayer, sincerity. Finding the warrior spirit inside of me, guided by a light that was hiding inside of me. Pride had to die for this rod to be righteous. See, Christ had to rise for this life to be bright in me. Sometimes we fall. Sometimes we crawl. But through it all, we hear His call. Building walls, standing tall, breaking falls, for our brothers. Yeah. Brothers, we stronger when walking together. Whether the weather is stormy or better, we measure our treasure in spiritual leather and never say never to heavenly preference. Learning to lead when we're serving the least of us, freeing the beast while releasing the priest in us, seeking increase while defeating was keeping us, chained to beliefs that are deeply deceiving us. Stand up, warrior, it's time to shine. Let your light lead down the line. Every brother by design. This is where our spirits climb. This is where our spirits stand as a beacon for the brothers still seeking. Show them strength isn't weakness when you're down on your knees. Every trial that tested me, every mile that pressed in me, built the man God blessed in me. Now I'm walking in destiny.